In the 1850s, the corner of Broadway and 42nd Street was nothing more than farmland and carriage paths. Cows grazed where neon signs would later burn. The air carried the scent of hay and horse manure, not exhaust and hot dogs. A few wooden houses dotted the muddy intersection, their windows dark by sunset. But beneath this quiet countryside, something restless stirred. The city was pushing northward, swallowing farms and fields with each passing year. Speculators whispered about the future of this crossroads, sensing opportunity in the empty lots. No one could have imagined that this sleepy corner would become the most electric place on earth, a stage where millions would gather to witness both celebration and chaos, where fortunes would rise and fall under blazing lights that never sleep. Manhattan in the 1850s was a study in contrasts. While the southern tip bustled with commerce and crowded tenements, everything north of 34th Street remained largely rural. The land that would become Times Square was part of a bucolic landscape, where small farms and scattered homes stood along dirt paths. This rural-urban divide was no accident. In 1811, the Commissioner's plan had mapped out Manhattan's famous grid system, a bold vision that plotted streets and avenues across terrain that hadn't yet been developed. The planners could scarcely imagine how their geometric lines would transform rugged hills and verdant meadows into the metropolis we know today. The area that would eventually become Times Square was known as Longacre Square, named after London's carriage-making district. Here, scattered wooden homes housed working-class families, small-scale farmers, and tradespeople. A few modest taverns served as community gathering spots where locals exchanged news and weary travelers rested their horses. Transportation to this northern frontier was primitive, but evolving. Horse-drawn omnibuses, essentially wooden boxes on wheels, lumbered up Broadway, carrying passengers for a few cents per ride. Early streetcar lines, their tracks embedded in muddy streets, connected this rural outpost to the commercial districts downtown. The journey was slow and uncomfortable, but it created a vital link between Manhattan's established neighborhoods and its undeveloped frontier. Yet even in this pastoral setting, change was brewing. Land speculators, the venture capitalists of their day, began quietly purchasing parcels of this seemingly worthless farmland. These visionaries saw beyond the cow pastures and vegetable gardens, imagining future avenues lined with businesses and homes. They bought cheap, held patiently, and waited for the city's inexorable northward march to multiply their investments. The transformation from sleepy crossroads to global phenomenon began with a decision that seemed mundane at the time. In 1900, city planners designated the intersection of Broadway and 42nd Street as a major hub for the new underground subway system. This single administrative choice would alter the destiny of Times Square forever. The subway brought what every business craves: foot traffic. Suddenly, thousands of commuters poured through this once quiet intersection daily. Shops, restaurants, and entertainment venues sprouted to capture this new audience. The economic geography of Manhattan began shifting dramatically. Into this moment of flux stepped a visionary newspaper publisher named Adolph Ochs. In 1904, Ochs made a decision that many considered foolhardy. He relocated his growing newspaper, the New York Times, from downtown to a striking new triangular tower on 42nd Street. The building rose 25 stories above the intersection, a skyscraping declaration of faith in this developing district. Ochs didn't stop with constructing an impressive headquarters. He launched an aggressive campaign to rename the area after his newspaper. City officials eventually agreed, and on April 8, 1904, Mayor George McClellan signed the resolution officially changing Longacre Square to Times Square. It was perhaps the most successful branding exercise in urban history. The newspaper celebrated its arrival with a spectacular fireworks display on New Year's Eve 1904, inaugurating a tradition that continues to this day. But Ochs's most transformative contribution was embracing electric advertising. The Times Tower became a canvas for innovative electric displays, including a moving electronic news ticker, dubbed the Zipper, that reported headlines to crowds below. Other businesses quickly followed the Times' lead, recognizing the promotional potential of electric signs. By 1910, the area blazed with illuminated advertisements for theaters, restaurants, and consumer products. The brilliant glow gave Broadway its nickname, the Great White Way, and established Times Square as the world's premier showcase for electric advertising. As the lights multiplied, so did the theaters. Theatrical impresarios, sensing opportunity, began abandoning their traditional homes in the Tenderloin district, relocating to grand new venues around Times Square. The Lyceum Theater opened in 1903, followed by the New Amsterdam in 1903, and dozens more in quick succession. Yet this rapid development came with hidden costs. As property values soared, working-class families and small businesses found themselves priced out of a neighborhood they had called home for generations. The mansions of the wealthy had once pushed the poor to Manhattan's periphery. Now, commerce and entertainment were doing the same. It was a pattern of displacement that would repeat throughout the square's history. By the 1910s, Times Square had become a laboratory for electric innovation. Companies competed to create the most eye-catching displays, experimenting with colored bulbs, animation, and increasingly elaborate designs. The Wrigley Spearmint gum sign featured 17,500 light bulbs. Planters Peanuts erected a 60-foot peanut-shaped billboard illuminated by thousands of bulbs. The night sky above 42nd Street glowed so brightly that sailors reported using it as a navigation point from miles out at sea. The theater district continued its explosive growth. Between 1910 and 1930, over 80 legitimate theaters opened within walking distance of Times Square. These weren't modest venues. They were palatial structures with grand facades, opulent lobbies, and thousands of seats. The Hippodrome Theater could accommodate 5,300 spectators, making it the largest theater in the world at that time. These venues showcased everything from serious drama to musical extravaganzas, vaudeville to burlesque. The Ziegfeld Follies, which debuted in 1907, exemplified the exuberant spirit of Times Square entertainment. Producer Florin Ziegfeld created lavish spectacles, featuring beautiful women, elaborate costumes, and popular music. Stars like Will Rogers, W.C. Fields, and Fanny Brice launched their careers on these stages. For millions of Americans, Times Square represented the pinnacle of glamour and sophistication. Yet beneath this glittering surface, conflicts simmered. Moral reformers viewed Times Square's growing nightlife with alarm, condemning the dance halls, cabarets, and burlesque houses as threats to public virtue. The Women's Municipal League and similar organizations lobbied for restrictions on entertainment they deemed indecent. Police conducted periodic raids on establishments suspected of promoting vice or serving alcohol to minors. Meanwhile, the area's explosive popularity created unprecedented logistical challenges. Sidewalks overflowed with pedestrians. Automobiles, horse-drawn carriages, and electric trolleys competed for space on congested streets. City services strained to manage garbage collection and maintain public order amid the crowds. Traffic jams became legendary, particularly during theater hours when thousands of patrons arrived simultaneously. In the shadows of the bright lights, an underground economy thrived. Professional gamblers operated elaborate betting operations from inconspicuous offices. Bootleggers supplied illegal alcohol to speakeasies disguised as legitimate businesses. Prostitution persisted, despite periodic crackdowns. This underworld wasn't separate from legitimate Times Square. It was interwoven with it, creating an ecosystem where legal and illegal enterprises coexisted in complex relationship. The 1920s saw Times Square reach its first golden age. Despite, or perhaps because of, prohibition, the area buzzed with speakeasies, jazz clubs, and dance halls. The Cotton Club, though located in nearby Harlem, drew Times Square crowds to see performances by Duke Ellington and Cab Calloway. Texas Guinan, the famous speakeasy hostess, greeted patrons with her catchphrase, "Hello, suckers," as they entered her 48th Street club. The era's freewheeling spirit found its perfect expression in Times Square's neon-lit nightlife. The decade also witnessed the rise of the movie palace. These weren't mere theaters, but entertainment temples designed to awe visitors before the film even began. The Paramount Theater opened in 1926 with 3,600 seats, a grand lobby featuring a marble staircase and a massive Wurlitzer organ that rose dramatically from beneath the stage. The Roxy Theater, dubbed the Cathedral of the Motion Picture, accommodated 5,920 patrons and employed a resident ballet company and 110-piece orchestra. But the party couldn't last forever. The stock market crash of 1929 and subsequent depression hit Times Square with devastating force. Theaters that had sold out nightly suddenly struggled to fill seats. Restaurants that had served wealthy patrons found their tables empty. By 1932, one-third of Broadway's theaters had closed or converted to movie houses, which offered cheaper entertainment. The bright lights dimmed as businesses reduced their electric bills by scaling back elaborate signs. World War II temporarily reversed this decline. The square became a symbolic heart of American patriotism and military morale. Servicemen on leave flocked to Times Square's USO centers, theaters, and dance halls. Recruiting stations operated around the clock. The famous photograph of a sailor kissing a nurse on VJ Day, August 14, 1945, captured the square's role as America's public celebration space. The post-war years, however, saw the beginning of a troubling transition. Television kept former theater-goers home. Middle-class families increasingly moved to suburbs, shopping in new malls rather than city department stores. Movie attendance declined sharply. These changes left Times Square businesses competing for a diminishing customer base. Some adapted by catering to a younger, less affluent crowd. Others simply closed, leaving vacant spaces that attracted less reputable enterprises. By the 1960s, Times Square had entered a spiral of decline that would last for decades. The legitimate theaters struggled against rising costs and falling attendance. Movie houses that had once shown first-run films began featuring exploitation films and eventually pornography. Massage parlors, peep shows, and adult bookstores proliferated, their garish signs promising live girls and XXX movies. The area's transformation accelerated through the 1970s. Crime rates soared as drug dealing, prostitution, and robbery became commonplace. Pimps openly recruited on street corners. Muggers targeted tourists. Times Square gained a new reputation, not as America's entertainment capital, but as a symbol of urban decay. The 1969 film Midnight Cowboy captured this gritty reality, depicting a Times Square of hustlers, addicts, and the desperate. The human toll of this deterioration was immense. Homeless individuals took shelter in abandoned buildings. Sex workers, many coerced or drug-dependent, faced daily violence. Businesses that had operated for generations closed their doors, unable to survive in an environment where customers feared walking the streets. Local residents, those who couldn't afford to leave, endured deteriorating conditions and declining services. City officials launched multiple cleanup initiatives throughout this period, but these efforts repeatedly faltered. The 42nd Street Development Corporation, formed in 1976, attempted to encourage investment in the area. Operation Crossroads targeted criminal activity. But these piecemeal approaches couldn't reverse decades of decline or address the complex social and economic factors driving Times Square's problems. The situation worsened with the crack cocaine epidemic of the mid-1980s. Open drug markets operated within sight of police. Violence escalated as rival dealers competed for territory. By 1984, Times Square had become the poster child for failed urban policy, a place where government seemed powerless against entrenched crime and decay. Yet this crisis finally catalyzed decisive action. In 1985, the city and state announced an ambitious $2.5 billion redevelopment plan for 42nd Street. The Times Square Business Improvement District formed to supplement public services. Police adopted new strategies to target quality-of-life crimes. These efforts marked a turning point, the beginning of a controversial but undeniable transformation. The decisive moment in Times Square's rebirth came from an unlikely source: Disney. In 1995, the Walt Disney Company announced plans to renovate the historic New Amsterdam Theater, a once grand venue that had fallen into severe disrepair. Many doubted that the family-friendly entertainment giant would risk its reputation on a street known for sex shops and drug dealers. But Disney saw potential where others saw decay. With substantial public subsidies, the company restored the theater to its original glory, reopening in 1997 with its production of The Lion King. Disney's investment signaled to other corporations that Times Square was safe for business. AMC Theaters, Madame Tussauds, and major hotel chains quickly followed. By 2000, most of the adult businesses had been pushed out through zoning restrictions and economic pressure. The transformation was astonishing in its speed and scope. Where porn theaters once stood, gleaming office towers and retail complexes rose. National chains like Olive Garden, Red Lobster, and Toys R Us replaced local businesses. Crime rates plummeted. Tourist numbers soared. Property values multiplied. By 2010, Times Square had become one of the world's most visited tourist attractions, drawing over 50 million visitors annually. Yet this remarkable resurrection prompted intense debate. Critics argued that the new Times Square had sacrificed authenticity for safety, trading cultural significance for corporate blandness. Local businesses that had survived the area's darkest days found themselves priced out during its renaissance. The gritty edge that had inspired generations of artists, writers, and musicians was methodically smoothed away in favor of a sanitized, family-friendly environment. Today's Times Square stands as a global symbol of commercial spectacle. Massive digital billboards have replaced the neon and light bulbs of earlier eras. International tourists crowd sidewalks once avoided by New Yorkers themselves. The area generates billions in economic activity and tax revenue. Crime rates remain at historic lows. By conventional metrics, the transformation has been an unqualified success. Yet the debate over Times Square's soul continues. Did we save the neighborhood or erase its essence? Is this authentic urban renewal or merely a themed environment? New York land, rather than the real city. The questions transcend this single intersection, touching on fundamental tensions in American urban life: progress versus preservation, commerce versus culture, safety versus spontaneity. Perhaps what makes Times Square eternally fascinating is that it has never been just one thing. It has always been a mirror reflecting America's evolving dreams, anxieties, and contradictions. From farmland to entertainment district, from moral battleground to tourist mecca, Times Square continues to reinvent itself, just like the restless city and nation that created it. Under those blazing lights that never sleep, the story of Times Square and America itself continues to unfold, one brilliant, complicated chapter at a time.